I felt enough responsibility for making sure Microsoft succeeded that I didn't want to be the dictator of Microsoft. We should always measure the good impacts and the bad impacts of the stuff we have. In order to deal with the dynamism of this fast-paced innovation, that you also want to make equivalent breakthroughs, not just in automating things, but improving education.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 to 9. For my top 10, top 10, 9 to 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because chances are you are the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Bill Gates, and my take on his top 10 rules for success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Don't be a dictator.
You made an interesting decision when you started Microsoft not to have a dual class share. And so many of these Silicon Valley companies do today. What do you think of that?
I think it's a mistake, and I've said that to everyone who's asked me. It's enough as an individual to really feel like you're responsible for the success of a company to actually go and short circuit the governance mechanism where if you really are making mistakes that your board can't outvote you, that you literally can just replace the board the next day. Well, how kind of hubris is that? I mean, if you're really doing a good job, you really think you're at risk of that? I felt enough responsibility for making sure Microsoft succeeded that I didn't want to be the dictator of Microsoft.
Rule number 2, persevere.
You were just a college dropout. You were very young looking. Did you get taken seriously by businessmen who were much older?
For some people, that youth and geekiness was like, hey, should we trust them? You know, that's so weird. We've never seen something like that before. So yes, we had to fight for acceptance. I couldn't rent cars, so I had to take cabs around because I was too young, and probably some people were a little tough. But then as we got a little bit of success, people were fascinated by this deep belief we had in software.
Rule number 3, measure the good and bad impact.
We should always measure the good impacts and the bad impacts of the stuff we have. Certainly whenever a new technology comes along, there's a lot of fear about what it's going to do. When the printing press came along, there was a great fear that people would just read books and not go out and seek, real experiences. And I tried that when I was that kid, just reading books, and maybe I'd be more rounded if there hadn't been books around. So I think it's hard. I haven't seen any evidence of any significance that socialization is really broken down in some bad way. I know that, with Skype now, I meet my daughter's boyfriend's parents when I walk into her bedroom, and there they are on Skype. So socialization is changing, but I'm not sure you can really say that there's a negative vector there. And there's so many positive vectors about if you're curious and you want to learn something. I was young and I'd ask a question about, hey, what's fertilizer? If the World Book didn't have it, I wasn't going to get the answer. Now, of course, you can go online, watch videos, and my children are always asking questions where if I don't know the answer, we just go and it's actually kind of fun to learn it together. So I'd say on balance, I think we're quite far ahead. There are some things about privacy, maybe overuse of pornography, letting your kids play too many video games, so you have to set a quota, just like I had to have a quota for how much I was allowed to read. But I think overwhelmingly, we've got mostly positive things, including the opportunity ahead of us of how the tool gets used in mainstream education.
Rule number 4, don't be distracted.
So recently you said that the biggest mistake you've made professionally was that Microsoft should have had the Android technology. Why was that the biggest mistake?
Well, when you're in a field, we were in the field of doing operating systems for personal computers. We knew the mobile phone would be very popular, and so we were doing what was called Windows Mobile. We missed being the dominant mobile operating system by a very tiny amount. We were distracted during our antitrust trial. We didn't assign the best people to do the work. So it's the biggest mistake I made in terms of something that was clearly within our skill set. We were clearly the company that should have achieved that. And we didn't. We allowed this Motorola design win and therefore the software momentum to go to Android. And so it became the dominant non-Apple mobile phone operating system globally.
Also, if you want to have more self-confidence and self-belief, the science says it can take up to 254 days of consecutive action for the habit to stick. That's what I want for you. So I've designed a custom free program where I'm going to send you an unlisted video for the next 254 days to shift your confidence and belief forward. The link to join is in the description below.
You really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it. If you ask people across the United States, is the future going to be better than the past? Most say no. I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student.
Rule number 5, keep doing better.
Within a year of going public, I think, there's some Fortune cover that says the deal that made Bill Gates $360 million or some weird thing like that.
All right. How did it change your life, or didn't it change your life at all?
Well, that whole period of time was amazing because I was hiring people as fast as I could. I had brought in Steve Ballmer, who was very good at that, and he was helping out. We had a sense of urgency that we wanted to lead the way. There was this graphics interface thing with Windows that we wanted to do. So I was super busy, and the idea that I could hire so quickly and invest and build this worldwide company was fascinating to me, but I was really busy. So, if some friend had tried to call me, I wouldn't have had too much time for that. I was really into building this company, and I was going out and telling people about the magic of software, which was good for Microsoft, but also helping them understand the opportunities and the huge change agent that software and eventually software plus the internet would become. So I was having fun, it was amazing, but I always thought, hey, we're one step away from not, leading here. We gotta keep doing better.
Rule number 6, improve your productivity.
I would say most of the opportunity to make computers improve work is in front of us instead of behind us. Only at kind of a very mechanical level of it's better than whiteout. Are we like, oh wow, this thing helps me get my work done? For extremely structured tasks like creating financial statements, where the application logic is very opaque and you're just led through it, or for very horizontal things where you really understand what you're up to and the machine doesn't see, oh, that email's part of personnel review, that email's part of planning the Salesforce meeting. So we have kind of the low-level horizontal, which in this way is amazing, and then we have this very structured applications world. The idea of matching what you in your head have as the intention of the overall activity and the semantics around it, and therefore sort of maximally helping you with those things. I think now that a lot of base level things are done very well, including gathering the data and learning from it, that we should be able to have what the machine thinks you're up to and what you think you're up to match each other and improve the productivity quality quite dramatically. But it's taken a long time to get to this point.
Rule number 7, value feedback.
Well, every software project is a glass half full in terms of things that went super well and things that didn't go super well. And the great thing about software is, particularly if your software is popular, you hear back from users. They tell you what they like, what they don't like. Maybe there's a device driver missing, maybe the error message isn't perfectly clear. on exactly what you're supposed to do, you hear about it. And it's great because that creates that feedback loop.
Rule number 8, don't procrastinate.
I had one habit that I developed when I was at college that was actually a very bad habit, which was I like to show people that I didn't do any work and that I didn't go to classes and I didn't care. And then at the very last minute, like 2 days before the test, I'd get serious about it. And people thought that was funny. That was my positioning, the guy who did nothing until the last minute. Then when I went into business, that was a really bad habit. And it took me a couple of years to get over that. Nobody praised me because I would do things at the last minute, and I tried to reverse to students I didn't think that highly of, who were always organized and had things done on time. I'm still working on it, but procrastination is not a good habit.
Rule number 9, work with competitors.
What about Steve Jobs in those days? What was your relationship with him in the early days, and how did it change?
Well, we were both there at the very beginning. The Apple I was a kit computer that Steve Wozniak designed, and he worked with Steve, and they came and offered it at various of these computer club meetings, and we went to lots of computer club meetings. So we were sort of colleagues in pitching the gospel of personal computing. We were kind of competitors. The time we worked together most intensely was after the IBM PC came out. Steve had a group, actually a small group at Apple, that was doing the Macintosh. And he came to us early on and asked us if we'd commit resources. We actually put more people on the project than Apple did, and did the early application software that used that mouse graphics interface. And so it was a huge win both for Microsoft and for Apple when the Macintosh became so successful.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is have fun.
Well, I hope you're insured with Geico.
Yeah, I'm a pretty careful driver. Hold on.
That was a smooth start. You remember when the first year you came was? Or?
Well, I didn't come until I was a director, because my theory was that of all the weekends I could come to Omaha, the one I'd get the least of your time was
true.
the annual
Yeah,
meeting.
right.
And I always read the transcript afterwards. But so it was only, what is that, 7 or...
Maybe a little longer.
2006 I came on the board, or 2007?
Yeah, 9 or 10 years ago. And once we started paying you $900 a year, you felt like you had to earn your money.
That's right. That's one of my key pieces of income now.
You want to buy a dilly bar?
You
bet.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Or, we do have your famous vanilla orange bars.
Yeah, now how many do we have here today?
We have at least 29,000.
29,000 bars.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Bars and mini bills.
And all the proceeds go to the children.
Care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're very proud of our...
29,000.
Yes.
Okay,
so
now
dilly bar, orange bar. We do have the fudge bar.
If you give me an orange bar, you'll have 28,999.
That's true, but you deserve it.
And the dilly bar, you're just in chocolate here?
Just in chocolate.
Okay, I'll go for that. Okay. Here's my the $2.
He's buying mine. This is the first. You're witnessing this. Yes. Please, media, take notes.
Now I've got a really special bonus clip that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? The science says that when you just watch a video, you get motivated, you get inspired, you have a 35% chance of following through on your goals. 35%? That's not enough. That's not enough just to get motivated. Believe Nation, we're here, you're here. Today matters. You're an action taker. When you commit to a plan of action of when and how you're going to follow through, when you write it down, you have a 91% chance of following through. And when you commit publicly to somebody else, it jumps to 95% chance. From 30-something% to 95% chance of you following through. Believe Nation, we need to make this happen. So question of the day, your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action specific for the next week. Put it down in the comments below, and I'm going to show on screen sometime next week to celebrate you.
The motivational aspects of why do you learn? Many people learn just to get a degree because that is how you get a job. But how do you make things interesting? that's kind of an unsolved problem. So I do view retraining and education that in order to deal with the dynamism of this fast-paced innovation, that you also want to make equivalent breakthroughs, not just in automating things, but improving education. And if you could have one wish to improve one thing in an economy, education is kind of the master switch of your capability. There's a few things like energy and stability and trust that are important too, but education would be right up there. And yet, if I say to you, oh, the best math teacher lived 50 years ago, he was better than any math teacher since then, you couldn't disprove that that was right. That is, our understanding of how you draw kids in and how you understand their misconceptions it's very ad hoc. The average math teacher today is probably about the same as 20 years ago. And yet, if we can do agents, we're talking about the general issue of being able to read and form knowledge. The idea of being as good as a one-on-one math tutor and seeing what types of conceptual mistakes people make, and even more importantly, understanding how you motivate them to, that you keep it at the right level, or you create the right problem domain that they might be interested in, or some sort of contest, or draw a social aspect into it. That motivational piece is where you see most of the variance. It's not domain knowledge that makes difference, as we see, because now it's online, and yet we don't see much change. So I am enthused about that. Whether that means that your learning will be more episodic and you continue to do it in adulthood, that would be ideal, so that even if the job market is switching, you're qualified. It was a fairly special time because computers, when I was young, were super expensive. And my friend Paul Allen and I actually snuck into places at the University of Washington where they had computers that weren't being used at night. And so we were fascinated by what the computer could do, but very few people were getting exposure. We had to go out of our way, and we were lucky that we did it all. And so then when the idea of moving the computer onto a chip that Intel would make, and that would make the computer literally millions of times cheaper than the ones we were using, so both more powerful and available to people on a personal level, then the idea of, okay, it would be very different, the software you needed, the way the industry would work. We were super lucky to be there when that was happening.
So what did your family think? Did they say there's something wrong with this young man? He wants to just do computers?
They knew I was obsessed with computers, that I would skip athletics, that I'd go in overnight, that I'd leave the house sometimes when they preferred I wouldn't go work at night on these things. And so it was kind of considered a little strange. And the big moment was when I said, instead of going to part of my senior year, that I wanted to go work for a company writing software. So they were great about allowing that to be my hobby. Yeah, if you want to have impact, usually delegation's important. Although, individual contributors in terms of inventing a drug or a new approach to things, that's phenomenal. So when Microsoft first got started, I wrote most of the code, and everybody else's code I read and kind of rewrote. And that got us up to 10 people. And then I had to say to myself, okay, we're going to ship code that I didn't edit. And that was hard for me. But I kind of got over that. Then I still said, okay, I'm going to interview everyone, and I'm going to at least look at samples of their code. Well, that got us up to about 40 people. And that was at a point where I had sold way more software than we could write because everybody was so impressed. And I thought, well, I need to collect enough money to keep hiring all these people. But the demand was so high that we were actually falling behind. That's when I hired Steve. And Steve figured out, A, how to control what promises I made to people, and B, how to hire lots of people, and really good people, and create organizations and teams. So I delegated to Steve that, and he was constantly saying to me, okay, we're going to hire programmers that you've never met. And I'd say, no, we're not. And then he would show me numerically that the constraint wasn't going to work. Then I said, okay, then I would, know all the managers of the people. And so over time, and of course, I could say the quality per person was falling monotonically, according to me. But, large problems, if you want to, write the most popular office productivity software, that one person absolutely can't do that. You can write pretty code. So everyone has to decide what scale of organization they want to work in. Eventually, my role was very much as a leader and a reviewer of managers, but the top people, and I hired some super experienced people, I would make sure they were pursuing a common vision and they were well coordinated. But in terms of a lot of management stuff, they were way better than I was. Now I had to have the framework to know what mix of skills that we needed and when they were working well enough together. But a lot of my value added was picking, say, to do graphics user interface or to do an integrated office type thing, or to go global and not use agents to have Microsoft be present all over the world. And so, yeah, picking what you're good at and how you find the other people to fill in those things, that's super important. And most founders aren't able to scale that up and kind of give up the hands-on things that they used to get a lot of pleasure and comfort from.
So you are here with your daughter who is 21, right? And you were 21 when you became a billionaire. Is that right?
Almost, yep.
All right, so around that age. You were like the youngest person to become a billionaire. Is that right?
Yeah, in terms of my own, earning it on my own, yeah.
Right, okay, so, well, it's just the most important thing, yeah. So when you were a kid, did you care about money, or you just cared about technology and it just happened?
Mostly I love software. I do remember at the private school I went to, there were other kids whose families were better off, like they had a Porsche or something, but it wasn't that big of a deal. My thing was that I just loved doing software, I loved hiring people, and I was stunned when it ended up being so valuable.
Really?
Yeah.
It surprised you?
Yeah, because I always had to be careful that we wouldn't hire too many people. I was always worried because people who worked for me were older than me and they had kids, and I always thought, well, what if we don't get paid? Will I be able to meet the payroll? So I was always very conservative about the finances. And then when we did go public, what was I, 30 by then I was kind of stunned at what it multiplied out to. And so you really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it, and that they're going to be willing to pay for some content.
Is that the operating idea that you have?
Well, each of these businesses is an entrepreneurial business. The overreaching theme is that, yes, I believe in the internet. I believe it'll get increasingly popular, and we're doing some neat new things to take advantage of that.
You've got a lot of cash on hand, yes?
Right.
All right. It puts you in an enviable position. You can experiment with a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and see what sticks and what flies.
Well, we're in business to make money,
but the other thing is providing such a cash flow for you.
Well, it all belongs to the shareholders.
Yeah.
We're not dilettantes.
No, I know.
We are business people, and it is true that if you find an idea that requires 3 or 4 years of improvement and patience and really sticking with it, that we're very good at that. Take Windows, which we bet our company on. Everybody doubted that would succeed. IBM did not support us in that. It took longer than we expected. Over 4 years before finally graphical interface got popular, and now people take it for granted. It's part of every personal computer, and you just expect it to be there. That was one of the grand successes of the company.
You went to Harvard and you dropped out. Have you ever thought how your life could be better off if you had gotten your Harvard degree?
Well, I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student. And there were smart people around, and they fed you, and they gave you these nice grades that made you feel smart. So I feel it was unfortunate that I didn't get to stay there, but I don't think I missed any knowledge because, whatever I needed to learn, I was still in a learning mode. If you ask people across the United States, is the future going to be better than the past? Most say no. My kids will be worse off than I am. They think innovation won't make the world better for them or their children. So who's right? The people who say innovation will create new possibilities and make the world better? Or the people who see a trend toward inequality and a decline in opportunity and don't think innovation will change that? The pessimists are wrong, in my view, but they're not crazy. If innovation is purely market-driven and we don't focus on the big inequities, then we could have amazing advances and inventions that leave the world even more divided. We won't improve public schools. We won't cure malaria. We won't end poverty. We won't develop the innovations poor farmers need to grow food in a changing climate. If our optimism doesn't address the problems that affect so many of our fellow human beings, then our optimism needs more empathy. If empathy channels our optimism, we will see the poverty and the disease and the poor schools. We will answer with our innovations, and we will surprise the pessimists. Over the next generation, you Stanford graduates will lead a new wave of innovation. Which problems will you decide to solve? If your world is wide, you can create the future we all want. If your world is narrow, you may create the future the pessimists fear. I started learning in Soweto that if we're going to make our optimism matter to everyone and empower people everywhere, we have to see the lives of those most in need. If we have optimism without empathy, then it doesn't matter how much we master the secrets of science. We're not really solving problems, we're just working on puzzles. I think most of you have a broader worldview than I had at your age. You can do better at this than I did. If you put your hearts and minds to it, you can surprise the pessimists. We're eager to see it. I think you can worship and mythologize the idea of working extremely hard. For my particular makeup, I mean, it really is true that I didn't believe in weekends, I didn't believe in vacations. I mean, I knew everybody's license plate, so I could tell you over the last month when their car had come and gone from the parking lot. So I don't recommend it. I don't think most people would enjoy it. Once I got into my 30s, I could hardly even imagine how I had done that. Because by then, some natural behavior kicked in, and I loved weekends, and my girlfriend liked vacations, and that turned out to be kind of a neat thing. Now I take lots of vacations. I mean, my 20-year-old self is so disgusted with my current self. I was sure I would never do anything but ride and coach. Now I have a plane. So it's very much counter-revelations have taken place at high speed. But yes, it is nice if during those first several years, if you have a team that's chosen to be pretty maniacal about the company. And how far that goes, you should have a mutual understanding so you're not one person expecting one thing, another person expecting another thing. And you'll have individuals who have, health or relatives or things that are distracted. But yes, I have a fairly hardcore view that there should be a very large sacrifice made during those early years. I think the quality that has helped me in lots of things is a kind of measurement scientific framework where I go in and say, did anybody handle this well? What are the very best practices? Do we have numbers on that? And let's get everybody measuring what they're doing, and so they can strive to match what the best achievement is. For us, often that's something like getting the vaccines out to all the children. Our history, we wake up every day knowing that in the business of technology, you have to think about what are you missing? What is the research or customer feedback that you should be paying more attention to? And how do you keep that pace of innovation very, very high? How do you make sure you're hiring the very best people? And that kind of focus has helped drive us forward through all the milestones the company has had. Certainly the internet is a great example of that. We had to tear up our plans and step back and say, well, how do we really embrace all that's good about the internet and recognize some of the shortcomings and make sure we're leading the way in reducing what has held people away from the internet.
When you were starting Microsoft, there were a lot of other software companies, and you were not number one at the beginning. I think there were others who were a little bit further ahead. What was it that enabled you to beat everybody else up in the software business? Was it Bill Gates? Was it something else? What was the unique factor that made you the most successful?
Yeah, we were actually the first, but there were companies, and they were all kind of single product companies who got ahead of us in terms of sales. By about 1991, we did become the largest of all of them. We were an engineering company. We were about how you hire smart people and how you use tools to develop software broadly. We were global, and we weren't about a single product. So like, for example, WordPerfect was a word processor, somebody might remember. They did so well with that product that their gross sales rivaled ours when we were doing a broad set of products. As soon as graphics interface caught on, which was Windows that became mainstream in 1995, we became far larger than the other software companies. Now, subsequently, Google, Apple, Amazon have become also extremely successful. But in the 90s, we were the strongest by far.
If you were 20 years old today and you wanted to start a new company, drop out of Harvard, what company or what area would you want to start it in?
Well, this is a great time to be doing innovation because the tools of innovation are so much better. There are lots of things in biology that are very interesting. There are lots of things in energy that are interesting. Given my background, I would start an AI company whose goal would be to teach computers how to read so that they can absorb and understand all the written knowledge of the world. That's an area where AI has yet to make progress, and it will be quite profound when we achieve that goal. Yeah, it was fun when we got to know each other. We would be traveling around Lagos where the traffic gives you lots of time to sit and talk sometimes. And I'd be showing Aliko my charts about, hey, Sokoto has a pretty low vaccination rate, and Kano needs to do this. And Aliko, he really knows people. He has relationships. He's willing to reach out to people. So he'd say, hey, let's call the governor, and we'll talk to him about this. And sure enough, next thing you know, we've got the governor of Sokoto on the phone. We're talking about this. And so this ability now to reach out, to draw on the broad relationships that Aliko's developed. And, I'm pretty shy about calling people. I just want to mail them my chart. But in fact, what's come out of that is that Aliko and I do video conference calls with 6 of the governors in the northern states where twice a year we look at vaccine coverage. Is the supply chain working? Are the workers showing up? Are the healthcare posts in the right locations? And it's a big challenge, but really drawing on Aliko's communication skills and the fact that he's not afraid to call anyone. Everyone he wants to talk to him. It's been phenomenal. So I get to, when I say, okay, we're going to build a TB drug team, we're going to build the TB vaccine team, we're going to build kill all the mosquitoes in the world, gene drive CRISPR team. I get to, in terms of how we fund that, organize it, how many locations, do we wait till they have this result before we scale it up? I get to use the same, or 80% the same type of thinking that I exercised in terms of, okay, let's go do Windows, let's go do Excel. So it's backing engineers, it's getting a sense of the team, what needs to be added to that team, or the IQs on the team adding up as opposed to subtracting from each other. And it's very comfortable because the most intense period of Microsoft was where these teams were about size 30. And for our diseases, typhoid, rotavirus, there's a lot of diseases that hopefully you'll never hear of again, most of which don't exist here in the US. But so it is very, very similar. It takes a decade generally from start to finish. The AIDS vaccine actually we're on year 14, and it'll probably be another 8 to 10 years before that one is completely done. So some take as long as 20 years because there's many dead ends and you have kind of a portfolio of approaches. But yes, I feel like my working with governments, hiring smart people, managing teams, it did prepare me well for this very operational organization that's a lot like a business, except that our profit is lives saved as opposed to a monetary measure. It's great that people are worried about the problems because they require action. Even take inequity, globally inequity is down. That is, the poor countries are getting richer faster than the richer countries are getting richer.
Right.
The bulk of humanity lives in middle-income countries today. If you go back 50 years, there were very, very few middle-income countries. It was pretty bimodal, where you had India and China, Africa were poor, and then Europe, US, Japan starting to be fairly well off, and not much in the middle. But today, China's at the high end of middle income, India's at the low end of middle income, Brazil, Indonesia. It's a phenomenal story, and the ability of science to solve problems, clearly in the case of heart disease and cancer, we'll make a lot of progress. Some of the more chronic diseases like depression, diabetes, I'm optimistic. Even obesity, we're gaining some fundamental understandings of the microbiome and the signaling mechanisms involved in these things. So yes, I am optimistic. It does bother me that most people aren't optimistic. And, so one of us is wrong and one of us is right. Historically, the newspapers or the media were very responsible about not letting untruths about vaccine safety get out there. Now, it's, you don't want to get rid of the good thing, which is that anybody can publish.
Right.
The barriers to entry, the diversity of voices is so phenomenal compared to traditional publishing.
Right. I feel like, and you have a bit of a YouTube presence, so you're able to share information about things through social media. It's kind of a social media age, so I feel like that ideally helps your cause more than it hurts it.
Yeah, my audience probably isn't deep with the vaccine doubters.
Okay, fair,
but in a creative way, trying to get positive messages to be interesting, and we have work to do on that. I would have thought, using experts and scientific knowledge, that all the internet would just make it so much easier to learn about things, and yet in some ways, people aren't seeking out complex information, particularly if it disagrees with some preconceived notion that they have. So, how can social media get out there and be a little bit of a force for education, particularly on climate, where without a consensus, we won't do the hard things that will save things for the next generation.
So most people over the last 200 years or so, whoever the wealthiest person in the world was, didn't usually work that hard when they got to be 60 or so. They kind of took life easy. You seem to be working pretty hard. What motivates you to still work so hard?
Well, I love my work. The work of the foundation is super interesting. I get to meet with the scientists. I get to go out in the field. I do think your habits are sort of set in your 20s and 30s. And by my standards of the 20s, I didn't believe in weekends back then, not to mention vacations. So I'm, fairly lazy compared to myself in my 20s, where I was a true fanatic. All I believed in was working on software night and day. And for my 20s, that was perfect. I didn't have a wife or family at all. And my role was very hands-on role. We think that progress can actually accelerate. The last 15 years have been wonderful, but the next 15, we can do more. And some people worry that when you talk about progress, that it'll reduce people's commitment to make things better. They think when you talk about progress that it shows you're naive and that maybe you don't realize all those things that are left to be done and how horrific they are. So sometimes purely that negative side of the story gets told, but you lose something very important if you only look at it that way. You lose the optimism about what's possible, and you lose the information where you look at the places that have done better than others, and you understand what is it about delivery, innovation, partnerships, caring, what has come together for the very best progress, and then spread that to the other places. That's what will help us drive at full speed. Urgency that I felt that if we didn't get Microsoft going right away, that somebody would do a great job building a software company, we won't have a chance. That probably ended up not being true, that I could have waited 2 or 3 years and the opportunity to do Microsoft still would be there. But anyway, I felt a sense of urgency. And it's not like, I still get to take courses and learn things today, things like The Learning Company, and there's all sorts of great books. So it's not like I've missed some part of my education.
Okay. When you dropped out, your father and mother said, "Are you sure you know what you want to do?" If one of your children dropped out of college to start a company, what would you say?
Well, I'd have to say yes, but the dropping out is not an irrevocable decision. If you try and start a company that doesn't go well, they always let you go back.
I feel like you always seem to swing for the fences in general. It's just sort of a new way of framing it. But I have to ask, if you are swinging for the fences, what if you miss?
Well, hopefully you get more than one swing.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
Either at the same problem, like multiple malaria vaccine constructs, so that if you have 2 or 3, the combined chance of success is much higher, or that you're working in multiple areas, not just one area.
Right.
In climate, for example, I have a company that's trying to make a nuclear reactor that would be very cheap and that would have safety so that the public would be very accepting of it.
Yeah.
Now, even I realize that's high risk, less than 50% chance all that comes together. And yet, if it did, and the only reason I'm involved is it would really help with climate, let us generate electricity without any greenhouse gases. Digital revolution, internet, social media, all of that, in certain respects, it's made it easier for us to see what's going on. Medical researchers are publishing articles every day, and all over the world, people can immediately see what the new thinking is there. Tracking the disease statistics, I click on the Johns Hopkins website every morning and see, okay, which countries are having a tough time with cases or deaths. Thank God for the internet. Work at home, our ability to connect up with each other is driven by that. But it also has meant that a lot of very surprisingly interesting conspiracy theories that are false, sadly, they spread a lot faster than the truth. So the idea that did somebody intentionally cause this thing, completely false, even in some cases accusing me of having some connection, that can be dangerous because it means, your willingness to believe, is the vaccine something I should take? Should I wear masks? If you go for these simple but wrong theories, getting people to work together and protect each other so we can get out of this as soon as possible, that's really at risk. You raised the question of how should the government deal with that. It's very difficult. Ideally, citizens are just well informed and they know which publications are very careful about what they say, and we don't have to engage in censorship. But so much of the almost crazy false information is out there that looking at the companies like Facebook and saying, okay, what is their role in that? When somebody says masks don't work, which is wrong, or they say just take hydroxychloroquine and you'll be totally safe. What is their responsibility for catching those things, particularly when they get up to large numbers? That is being debated. And, I think we'll come out of this with those companies feeling a stronger sense of responsibility and actually understanding, having the public debate about how they need to help here.
Knowing that you're doing all this work, but someone in my position, I'm not a philanthropist, I don't necessarily have the means. How does someone like me or someone watching this help in the best way they can?
Well, I wish more people could actually get to these countries, join the Peace Corps, spend time, even just spending a few weeks there and see how great the needs are and see the progress. A lot of, volunteer work in the United States builds that sense of, okay, we care about other humans, even, beyond our own family group, even people who had very different experiences. So, at a young age, a little bit of giving money away, to form that habit and picking which things you really want to give to, including lots of things here in the US, and getting involved with volunteer time. Those are the people who I think will help kind of bring the world together and avoid just this divisiveness that is my greatest concern. The idea that you could get people to decide to support this foreign aid thing, which is a big deal for our foundation, from a numeric point of view, we're still pushing that a little bit, but honestly, the story of the one child, if you say to an audience, here's the picture of this child, shall we save this child? They're more engaged than if you said, hey, let's save 1 million children. So there's definitely a sort of 10 to the 6th problem here somewhere.
Yeah, that's
that
fascinating.
Humans are not wired to do that on a numeric basis. And so, that's why we have people like Bono and many others who come from a more storytelling world, and then they let me throw a few charts and numbers in, just because I think that should be there. Once your heart tells you what direction to go in, to prove that this is a very affordable, not a big deal, well-managed path to be on. Well, in Microsoft, my early partner was Paul Allen, and then Steve Ballmer was my partner. Now Melinda's even a totally equal partner in all the foundation work we're doing. So she and I run it together. It was so fascinating. I mean, the relationships we were building, learning all this new stuff, to have somebody to brainstorm with about it, made it a lot more fun. Things like writing letters together, giving speeches together, we had to learn how to bring out the best of the both of us in doing those things. But yeah, it was always, clear we wanted to do it together. Then, as Microsoft was becoming super successful, the idea of, okay, what am I going to do with this money? I could spend a little bit on myself, and I could give some to kids and, make sure they got a good education, whatever. But as a percentage, even the maximum of those two outlets, became tiny. And so then it was, okay, what do philanthropists do? And studying Rockefeller and all sorts of people who've done all that stuff, I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. Are there research topics that aren't getting enough money? And that's where I started to learn about global health and realized that, like malaria, nobody was putting any money into malaria. The US Army historically had put money in because troops were exposed to malaria, but then they got these drugs, prophylactic drugs, like mefloquine, lariam, and so they didn't need to put any more money into it. And so our first 30 million, we became the biggest funder in a disease that kills 1 million children a year at that time. We're down to 400,000 now. So it was a progression, working with Paul Allen in high school, working with Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, then meeting and marrying Melinda. Each of those, were very, very important in getting my mind, shaping whatever abilities I have towards something worthwhile.
Let's say you're interviewing for a junior engineer position at Microsoft. Sitting in a boardroom or on video call in 2020. Why should we hire you?
You should look at the code that I've written. I'm kind of crazy. I write software programs way beyond any classes that I've taken, and think I've gotten better over time. So take a look at how ambitious I've been there. I do think I can work well with people. I might criticize their code a little harshly, but overall, I like to be on a team. I like ambitious goals. I like thinking through how we can anticipate the future. Software is cool, and I want to be involved.
So do you have any regrets in your life? You seem to have a life that most people would love to live. You got a happy family, great marriage, foundation, business success. Is there anything, can you make us feel good by saying you've done something that didn't work out, or just make us, because all of us feel bad because we look at you and we can't do what you've done. So tell us something that's bad that you've done or you feel inadequate about. Something, there must be something.
No, I am super lucky. They marrying Melinda, the experience at Microsoft, that although it had its ups and downs was phenomenal. The work of the foundation, and
no regrets about anything.
I wouldn't try and go back and change anything. I mean, for example, the antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft, was bad for the company. It created a lot of distraction. We would have done a lot of things, including the mobile operating system, better if it hadn't been for that. But in a way, it was a lesson for me, so it probably accelerated my retirement by 5 or 6 years, which overall for me probably was a good thing. I don't think it was a principled set of activities, but that's another story. If you want to learn computer science, just, Knuth wrote the book, buy it, okay. Read it and do the problems if you really think you know this thing. If you want to learn physics, Feynman wrote the book. Just read the book, it's all there. So that when we put stuff online, we don't have anything in online physics that's any better than Feynman's book, honestly. Now, it's a little easier to learn. The guy makes jokes every 20 minutes, or at least tries to, and he does more demos and things. So learning is a weird social phenomena. And so, our foundation, our big problem is that the group that does the worst with online learning are low-income students, because their notion of why am I learning, their sense of self-confidence, the ability to figure out, I just got stuck because, 2 minuses cancel out, and I never saw that notation before. They just hit dead ends all the time, that if you're sitting in your dorm at Stanford, somebody walks down and helps you get through it. As usual, if you have negative consequences for mistakes, it kind of discourages that completing the loop type system. There are a few cases like in civil aviation where the willingness to look at mistakes and apply massive resources like we're seeing today to say, okay, what went wrong here? It really is pretty mind-blowing.
So today, people come to you all the time for money, I assume. Everywhere you go, people say, by the way, I have this thing you should invest in. I have a couple myself I'll mention later. No, I'm just kidding. No, a couple of things you should invest in or things you should give money to. So how do you resist it? You have some person who says no for you, or how do you do that?
Many people.
Many people say no.
Well, once you picked what you care about, if somebody has something that can make a difference in global health, we're super interested. And we have staff of 1,500 people, and if it's to do with global health, some of those people will come out and talk through with you whatever your innovation is and how we can partner with you on that. Okay. So that's clearly in our area. If it is something that can substantially improve K through 12 education, then we're going to be very interested in it. If people are asking outside of those things, then fortunately you can say no, because focus is key to philanthropy. I like to look at numbers a lot, and so when I look at the numbers, I'm just amazed, whether it's the quality of the inner city education, the dropout rates. Oprah did a thing where she had kids from an inner city school go look at the suburban school and vice versa, and they were just stunned that the building and everything was so completely different. So I think even for me, I have to go, whether it's the inner city in America, talking to people who live there, or outside the US, we have this same thing. The situation in Africa, it's overwhelmingly black population, is so much worse than people are probably aware of. And so hands-on visits, whether it's to the schools or the clinics, I think that is necessary to hear the voices of people who've been hurt. And then, there's a lot of good movies now. There's a lot of good books. I was just reading the new Jim Crow, which is pretty eloquent and forceful about the justice system and the role that it plays in perpetuating bad conditions. And, it takes a lot to try and put yourself having empathy for other people. So we all have to push harder on this. There's no doubt that the antitrust lawsuit was bad for Microsoft, and we would have been more focused on creating the phone operating system. And so instead of using Android today, you would be using Windows Mobile. If it hadn't been for the antitrust case, Microsoft would have gone, we were so close. I was just too distracted. I screwed that up because of the distraction. And we were just 3 months too late with the release that Motorola would have used on a phone. So yes, it's a winner-take-all game, that is for sure. That now nobody here's ever heard of Windows Mobile, but oh well. And I wouldn't. That's a few $100 billion here or there. I wouldn't have retired as soon, and that one is less. I am disappointed that Windows Mobile didn't succeed, but in terms of my own life, even though it was a very painful thing because I got very personally involved in the defense of the company, the fact that I retired earlier probably net was good for me because I got down the learning curve on the foundation. I got to partner with Melinda in the early days of the foundation. And, I don't have a life where I'm allowed to complain because basically, only 99% of things have worked out very, very well. I'm very lucky that my foundation work, the part-time work I do for Microsoft, I see that extending, for decades into the future. And having an understanding of innovation, I think shaping innovation in many of these areas, there is a unique role that I can help play. The nice thing now that I'm not so extreme, in my 20s, I didn't get to read much at all. Yeah. And so all this stuff is going on in biology and math. I just didn't get to read it. Then when I did get into my 30s, those vacations were a time to go back because when I was a student, you could study all sorts of things. Anyway, now, I read a lot of science, and that uses up, maybe half of the slots that I have. Really understanding U.S. poverty and what's going on there. There's a few dozen books that try and give you a glimpse of that are very good. This book, Factfulness, let me say, it definitely creates a framing for what's going on in the world. And the other one that's right up there is any Pinker book, starting with Better Angels of Our Nature. I do think that if you want to talk about software innovation, that at least listening to the ideas of people who've been successful in that area isn't such a bad thing. I mean, you literally say that we can't talk to politicians if you really think that sharing our opinions about, say, climate change or malaria or malnutrition or charter schools, if that's really bad, this group does have more free time. They have proven that they're energetic, can solve some things, and often they get into a phase of their life, like Steve Schwartzman is putting a lot of his energy and thought into very creative, and I think what will be positively impactful philanthropy.
How would you define your strengths and your weaknesses, how you can incorporate those into a team kind of aspect?
Well, I'm not somebody who knows a lot about marketing. I wouldn't enjoy being a salesman. For a position where you're actually creating the products and thinking through what those features should be, I'm fascinated by that. I've followed the history of the industry, read about the mistakes that have been made. So product definition, product creation, very strong. If you have a team that understands the customers, the sales, the marketing. I'm not going to bring that, but I would enjoy working with them. The key thing was that Paul, Alan, and I had loved working on software since we were lucky enough to be exposed. Literally, I was 13 in 8th grade when this time-sharing terminal came in, and we just did it day and night and got better. And we could see that the magic of software combined with this miracle of the microprocessor, subject to Moore's law, exponential improvement, that was a magic combination. And we'd look around and say, hey, how come everybody's not saying this is amazing? I mean, we're going to dethrone IBM, and why doesn't Digital Equipment get it? Why is the guy who runs it, this is a company that's long gone, but dominated many computers at the time, why isn't that guy up there saying it's wrong? We know it's right. And so the key event for us was, it was a very cold Boston winter, and a kit computer came out on this Popular Electronics magazine, and we said, oh, this is happening without us. I mean, here we are doing nothing. And so we called the company up and said, hey, we're ready. And then we called them back. We actually did the work, and then we called them back and said, how do you make the stuff go in and out of the computer, the I/O? And they said, well, that's interesting. Nobody else has ever asked that. You must really be doing something. So that was, anyway, our very first customer. And so we grabbed onto it to be the very first. And we were the first to say there should be a software industry and come and do it. In a sense, it was one of the lower risk things I've ever done in my life because, I could have always gone back. I decided to focus more on giving away than making money. And so I've gotten a chance to travel the world, be out in Africa and Asia quite a bit, and see the needs that are out there. And now our foundation is very focused on global health, focused on agriculture, because the majority of the very poor in the world are farmers who have very small plots of land. So any increase in productivity or certainty of their crop coming in can make a huge difference for them. And you might think of a career in software, selling to people who can afford personal computers, and now the career at the foundation is being very different. And certainly they're different in the sense that now it's about vaccines. Now a lot it's with various governments, the donor governments, the governments in import countries. But at its core, it's really basically the same thing, which is finding innovators, people who've got breakthrough ideas, be willing to back them, understand what they're working on, measure what they're coming up with, try and make sure that when it's delivered, it really has the impact it's supposed to be, and getting into a feedback loop driven by very precise measurement. We felt a little bad, certainly I did, about leaving the university when I thought very interesting work on artificial intelligence was really on the verge of taking place and symbolically proving programs were correct. Ironically now, it's taken a long time. The rate of progress, which is hard to make numeric, in both those areas has been quite modest. I mean, we haven't gone backwards or anything, but AI has turned out to be a tougher problem, which is fascinating. And now there are some interesting advances, and likewise symbolic type things, there are some now advances. So we thought we'd miss being more at the center of those. Now through at least funding Microsoft research, we get to have some level of involvement in that. One of Paul's ideas was to build a 360 emulator. That was the dominant mainframe of the time, used bit slice architecture to just blow away the pricing on mainframe computing. But we decided that was kind of boring compared to personal computing. A company came along about 5 years later, 2Pi, and did it. They didn't do the software piece right. That's why they failed, because we still think it was a good idea. But we didn't have anything even close to, hey, let's build a computer that we want to use, that we want to have as a tool for our own messing around and communication and creativity. That kind of got at the center of our thinking, even from the early days. When I was young, I had to read the World Book sort of alphabetically, and it didn't have any videos you could click on, and it was, it's weird to learn things alphabetically. It's kind of hard to create quite the same framework as you can with all these great online materials. And so I think the empowerment now, the opportunity to see what's going on, whether it's in fields of science or in places that are far away, including those most in need, it's never been so great. It's a wonderful time to be a student. Now, software, in terms of letting us simulate things, whether it's scientific phenomena or social phenomena, it's getting better and better. And so I think almost any major that you have nowadays, understanding what software, how it's going to change those activities is a key part of being at the cutting edge. When you have a tragedy like this pandemic, there is always the possibility you're going to narrow your community that you care about. You're going to think about yourself or your family, not the whole country, including those who've been somewhat left behind. Likewise, there's a risk looking at Africa and other developing countries and saying, no, we need to help them out because difficulties there of not enough food are really extreme, and small amounts of the budget, less than 1%, can help them out. Likewise, you don't want to just think about the here and now, you also want to think about the future. After all, the government failed us by not anticipating this pandemic. There were voices like mine in TED Talk and other venues that kind of said, hey, get ready. We don't know when, but it's coming. Sadly, that didn't happen. Another thing we trust government to get us ready for is climate change. That's coming, and it won't be as easy as creating a vaccine to solve it. And so right now, in terms of people's sympathy, being broad, being willing to address other problems even though they're not here right now, I am actually seeing a lot of positive voices. People saying, make sure the recovery is a green recovery. Europe has done a lot on that. And so, and actually the dialogue in politics about, does climate change matter is stronger today than it's ever been. So this closing in and only worrying about the short term, I'm not seeing that. Of course, your audience, which is very young, will be the key to saying, let's not just look at this short term. Let's start the investments that deal with inequities. Let's start the investments that can make sure climate change doesn't come in and have even more tragic results than this pandemic does. Young people thinking about policies, getting involved. I think I'm seeing an uptick. I hope that's sustained because they're the ones who will really do the innovative work. Now, part of the thing that drives computer science forward is doing risky things, having a long-term time horizon. And when Microsoft was a small company, we benefited from the fact that AT&T and Xerox and other companies had made investments in research, that they'd reached out and worked with universities on a broad basis. So we felt very lucky that as we got to a certain level of success, we could start our own research group and have that research group be in partnership with top universities all over the world doing advanced programs, things that range from the work on speech recognition all the way up to quantum computing. We have a fairly serious program that has a high risk of failure, which makes it fun and interesting, on quantum computing. And even in the best case, it's probably a decade away before that makes a difference. But that's the kind of thing that when it works can have incredibly high payoff. There's no doubt that creating a board, having people like Dave Marquardt there who wasn't at the company, and we were so overwrought about, this is right, this is wrong, we messed this up, that having people have a little bit of distance come in and talk to us is good. For the last 30 years or so, I've gotten to be friends with Warren Buffett. And he's in Omaha. He's not in this tech world at all, and to him it's like, hey, how could you ever know which will rise and which will fall? I'm not going to put money until Apple sold at a multiple of 12. Then he decided he could put $50 billion into that. After he asked all his friends, hey, if somebody had an iPhone that was half as expensive, would you switch away? Or is it more like jewelry where you really want to have an iPhone? And so he decided that those profit streams might not be eliminated anytime soon. Anyway, because he's not in this world, he has a definite way of looking at things, including this idea of how work should be fun. He has made his work so much fun that he works more hours than I do. He works 6 days a week at 88 years old. And he likes to say that he skips to work every day. He doesn't, but he says that.
It's a good visual.
When he was 83, he could still skip, but now he's gotten really, he can't do it. Having somebody like that, the toughest thing I went through was this antitrust lawsuit where, it didn't seem very predictable. And he was a great counsel during all of that stuff. So getting somebody who's successful in another domain, but yet kind of a business type mindset. Anyway, for me, that was a huge gift.
If you want 10 more amazing rules from Bill Gates, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Why should we hire you?
You should look at the code that I've written. I'm kind of crazy. I write software programs way beyond any classes that I've taken and think I've gotten better over time. So take a look